Hi, and welcome to another episode of She Leads Biotech, the podcast where we celebrate the achievements of women in the life sciences. Today's guest's journey into biotech started with a childhood dream of becoming a surgeon, at a time when women were rarely encouraged to think beyond traditional roles. What followed was a career shaped by persistence, curiosity, and an extraordinary ability to adapt and lead. From early bench research at the National Cancer Institute and Memorial Sloan Kettering to building clinical operations teams inside emerging biotech companies, she's spent decades helping bring complex therapies closer to patients. In this episode, we explore the realities behind clinical operations, the pressure of timelines and compliance in rare disease development, and why fractional leadership is becoming such an important model for early-stage biotech companies. But what makes her story especially powerful is that her connection to rare disease became deeply personal when her daughter was diagnosed with DDX3X syndrome. That experience transformed not only the way she views patient advocacy, but also the way she approaches leadership, clinical development, and the human impact behind every trial. So please welcome clinical operations leader, rare disease advocate, and fractional biotech executive, Sarah DiSalvatore. Sarah, hello, happy Friday.
Hi, Sharon. Happy Friday.
Almost the weekend. Where am I speaking to you from?
New Jersey.
Oh, so we're just across the border from each other.
Okay. Where are
Neighbouring
you?
states. New
Okay.
York.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Excellent. Well, listen, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time out to join us today. Such a long career in the space. I'm very excited to explore that. But tell me, how did it start for you? Did you always have a burning desire to be involved in biology and then in medicine, or did you kind of fall into it? How did it all start?
Yes, I had a burning desire as a child. 8 years old, I remember wanting to be a surgeon.
Okay.
And when I was a senior in high school, you were told, women at that time, you could be a nurse or a teacher, right? Why don't you think of one of those professions? And neither one of them is bad, but there was
Just didn't
no
appeal.
direction. There was no direction of maybe you could work on Wall Street one day. So I went the nursing route, which I was very happy to do. And during college, I decided I did my first microbiology class looking at the microenvironment of our bodies was so fascinating. So from that point on, I really devoted myself to research and then ended up in the clinical operations space. But yeah.
So you got you got your BS in biology, and you did a master's in, I can never say any of these words, epidemiology.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And
Very good.
Thank you. Infectious diseases. Was
Mm-hmm.
that because that was the route you wanted to take, or was that what was being covered? Was there a reason
great
why
question.
you picked those topics?
When I was in college, I also received a minor or a concentration in microbiology. So I took a virology class as part of that.
Right.
And started doing research. I would knock on the advisor's door every day. Can you please add me to your research team? He said, I only take one or two people, and I wouldn't stop. So he finally said,
Let me be one of those people.
Yeah, but it just, if you're persistent, and so he did give me a spot. And I was able to spend a semester researching a vaccine against avian flu virus, which was prominent where I went to college down in Salisbury and Eastern Shore of Maryland. So once I moved into that space, I really had an affinity for more viral infectious disease type diseases. Although my first job out of college was with the National Cancer Institute, again, working on that micro level of researching different types of cancers and different possible treatments, but more so biological molecular detection.
Okay. So, and you've spent a number of years within all aspects of clin ops, clin development, all sorts of things. And there's a lot being said about the clinical side of the business at the moment. What do you think that people underestimate about clinical operations?
I think they underestimate how much work we really do. Because I think at the end of the day, the leadership team or the press release shows the data. They have the data. And it looks really nice if it's good and it's in a graph and it looks beautiful. But how did it get there?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of different, I'm not just saying clinical operations is responsible. There's regulatory and preclinical and pharmacology and CMC, but day-to-day workload, it's a heavy lift. You can never overestimate oversight, no matter if you are managing the study as a sponsor execution study or outsourcing to CRO and vendors, and compliance. You can never underestimate compliance. And I have been in companies and been in situations where I had to bring in the compliance component. And I love doing that because if we don't comply with ICH GCP regulations and don't comply with oversight, bringing inspection readiness very early on is key because you have your checklist, you know what you need to do and have, and it's a living document. That checklist, in case you change the way you file one file and put it into another repository, but the compliance piece.
And would you say that that's something that a number of companies get wrong or they don't give as much emphasis to?
Yeah, I think.
And is it purely done because we don't know, or it's fine, we'll get through that?
I think a lot of people don't know the details of what's involved in putting quality together and why it is so important. I faced a lot of challenges in my career when I said to young companies, we have to bring in a quality assistant team or a consultant because now a lot of companies don't want to hire full-time employees if they're not big enough to maintain a workload for QA. Yep. Clinical QA. And I received pushback at a company I was at because they were being money conscious, which we all are in this industry. And I said, okay, we need to audit this vendor. And they were pushing back. And I said, would you buy a house without having it inspected? And they said, no. And I said, that's why we have to do capability audits early on, right when we've selected the vendor. And then I got pushed back on evaluating and auditing the CRO who was going to handle a multiple pipeline of ours. And I said, would you put your baby in a really bad daycare? When you're looking for daycare for your children or your baby, you want the best, right? Yeah. We are putting our compound, our pipeline with the CRO. We want the best and we want to make sure we audit them. So once I got through that threshold with them, anything I needed for compliance, they gave me money for or, approval for.
So it's really just a case of people seeing the benefit behind what needs to happen.
Yeah. And you can audit and they look great. You get into the study and things fall apart. So that is why I ensure that every trial has a study audit plan in place. And at a minimum, start auditing within year one of that study.
Right.
Yes, it costs money. It costs $13,000 an audit, which is, it's a lot, but it's actually not that bad in the grand scheme of things because you have to make sure your data is accurate. I just recently heard a story where someone told me that they had refused to file because they couldn't authenticate the data trail. So it happens.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So just kind of help me understand. You studied nursing. You went into clinical operations from the start. What did your career path look like once your education side had finished?
Sure. I did bench research for about 7 years after I graduated college. So I worked at National Cancer Institute and then went to Sloan Kettering and then went to Wyeth, which is now Pfizer. And so I worked on a lot of cancer research and a lot of infectious disease research. So it was a nice combination of my interests. I really love the field of oncology. and infectious diseases. So I wanted to be a doctor, as I said earlier. And so I left Sloan Kettering to just dedicate time to studying for the MCATs and taking the MCATs and sending out applications to 8 medical schools. But I received 8 rejection letters that said, thank you for your interest in blah, blah, blah medical school. We only take 126 applicants, and we've had over 40. I knew. So that's when I said, let me continue research and pursued my master's in public health and epidemiology. So I did that at night. I worked during the day. And while I was at Wyeth and working on my master's, I knew people in the clinical operations division. And I also joined the golf team. So that was a great way to network.
That's a good move.
It really is. And someone on the team said, oh, we have a position open. Why don't you apply? So I did. And I'm always grateful for the people who hire me in these positions, and very grateful that this particular person hired me, because from that point on, my career really took off in clinical operations.
Cool. Okay. And what about your roles within clinical operations? When did you start moving from a kind of operator into a leader role, or did you kind of keep the two going all the way through? How did it work?
I kind of just moved into a leadership role after I left Wyeth/Pfizer. I went to a startup, and I was the 10th person hired there, and it was in Baltimore, and the CEO threw a clinical development plan on my desk and said, start writing. And I'm like, I'm 32. I mean, I don't know any of this. What do you mean start writing? But you're like, okay, right. You take every challenge as an opportunity. And I still do it to this day.
Yep.
I contributed to it, wrote it, and I was able to build a team. And so really, I would say my first position outside of the clinical trial manager position at Wyeth, I've been more in that leadership role ever since. But hands-on, especially in any startup company, you're rolling up your sleeves and you're getting in. So I guess I have that dual role, but I've been criticized in some roles that I have never been a CRA and a monitor at a site. So how would I know what to do? That's true, but I did a lot of hands-on learning and would go out with monitors and have them teach me and pick that up, and then eventually co-monitor out at sites with monitors, and able to see the data myself and monitor myself. So that came with the job in a few different companies.
Okay. And looking back in hindsight in your journey, what did you learn about leadership as you were going through it?
I think I became more confident, more vocal. I was always afraid to speak up. I could do the work, I can manage a team, but speaking up to a board of directors. And so I had to quickly learn to adapt to managing up. Now I'm great at it. I really feel that I can manage up really well because the years of experience have allowed me to. But in terms of strengthening leadership, it's connecting with the people you work with or that work with you, and building relationships, communicating openly, being as transparent as I can be at times, and developing a level of trust between myself, my direct reports, and my management team has gone a long way. So it's trust, communication, learning to speak up and advocate for not only yourself, but your team. And what's challenging a lot of times is speaking up and saying, this study design is not going to work. This budget is way under budget. People don't want to hear that. They want to hear, everything's great, this looks good. It's only this study budget we can't go over. Then you can't do the study, or you get more money. So now I'm pretty confident within the last probably 8 to 10 years that I know what I'm talking about, and I can actually put a budget together, forecast a budget, and I've come in within like $400 of what the vendor actually gives us. So very precise after all of these years, and especially working in the rare disease space, it's a lot more expensive now to run those studies, but I'm able to really be confident in this leadership role on multiple levels. Like I said, the budgeting, the relationships.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a moment, was there a light bulb moment for you that you thought, I've got it now. Okay, I'm no longer am I not going to speak up? Or was it a quieter, more evolving as your confidence grew with, as you say, putting
Mhm.
budgets together and all those sorts of things? Which way was it?
Yeah, it was probably when I joined a startup after being at ImClone, which was probably the best experience anyone could ever ask for, because I can get back to the people that came from ImClone while I was there have gone off to do amazing things.
Right.
You know, CEO of Rocket, the CMO has started many companies, like, you know, another finance person, the CEO of a company, and it really gave me an amazing network that I value to this day. There, the position was good. It was busy. It was director level, and then I would say after I left Helston Therapeutics, um, and I had to be one of the only women at a company at a startup and the sixth hire.
Yep.
I knew right away what to do. It just took over. I just had my baby. I didn't know if it was hormone, but from that point on, I
No.
knew how, yeah.
Excellent. Okay.
And I don't know what triggered that. I don't know. Maybe because I was my own boss. I was put in a position to say, hey, this is yours. You do it and figure it out. So you have some creativity.
And I think
Yeah.
when you're given the confidence that you have that autonomy to
Mhm.
do something and that belief in yourself, okay, do you know what? I'm going to stand or fall on this, but it's going to be on my terms
Yeah. And I'll
rather
take
than someone.
full accountability. I
Yep.
think that also comes with leadership growth, is taking accountability. So when things go good or bad, up or down, taking accountability, I think, is one of the strongest components to leadership in general, not just in biotech.
Right. Okay. And in recent years, you've shifted your direction into fractional leadership. Now, there's a lot of buzzwords that jot around fractional leadership. What does it mean to you? What does being a fractional leader and how you're approaching it, what does it mean to you?
It means to me starting the foundation of a very young company and ensuring that, as I said before, that it's compliant, that it's built fit for purpose. We're working agility. I'm extremely agile, and there's no learning curve. I can jump right into this role without a significant learning curve.
Right.
And I'm also teaching people who have no idea, in some instances, what the dynamics are and the configuration of clinical operations. And so it's actually teaching people and partnering with them to help build out this infrastructure.
What drove the decision for you to do it?
So I lost my previous position. I was vice president of clinical operations at Ascidian Therapeutics. It was really, really interesting working on rare disease space in ophthalmology. So I had wanted to, even a year before that, was considering consulting. And I wanted to go into real estate investment too. So I thought, okay, my dream is going to be consulting, and then on the side doing a lot of the real estate investment and long-term, short-term rentals. So I lost my job, and of course I was really upset. I loved what I did. I loved the people, but then it gave me the opportunity to do what I want to do. So
Yep.
with some time off I connected with a company called Rare Moon Consulting, and one of their chief operating officer was a fractional regulatory consultant for Ascidian. And he called me up within a couple of weeks and he said, can you help us build out this clinical role? After we file the IND, the companies say, well, what do we do now? And so between them and us, we've really built up this nice arm of their consulting firm where they can still focus on orphan drug designations, IND submissions, really masters at regulatory. And then they have me building out this role of a fractional clinical operation executive.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, and then I started to do some real estate last time. So I joined the class, and so maybe dreams do come true.
There you go. See, if you visualize it,
Yes.
it will come.
You have
That
to
kind of
manifest.
like
Yep.
field of dreams type of thing. And why do you think companies are turning to fractional leadership?
Yeah, I saw it really at Ascidian and during my time there throughout the industry, but firsthand experience was at Ascidian, and we had most of my team were contractors, and it saved the company from, when you hire too fast. I've seen it so many times. The CEOs feel really bad to have to let people go, and I know that's not in our business plan or business model in any company you go into to think about having to let people go and not getting funding. I think the funding and the investment community the last couple of years really changed configurations of small companies. And so instead of hiring people and giving them benefits, a salary, paid time off, and a bonus, they could hire someone fractionally and it would be could be half the cost of hiring a full-time employee. And you're getting that experience and you can step in and out as you need to. So yeah, I think that's why a lot of companies now are starting. And then once as a fractional, at least right now what I'm doing is helping build up the clinical operations to a certain milestone. And then at that point, if I leave that role, they have a great team in place and they can really take it on. So that's my goal now, is getting in before filing the IND, way before. It doesn't have to be many hours, but you need clinical operations there to really justify the logistics of the study and contribute. And then you can work on, during the filing of the IND, you can also begin the clinical operations planning. It's risky. I've done it before, haven't had it backfire. And so now I continue doing it again and again.
And again. Excellent. Okay. And clearly, it's really building pace now. As more and more, certainly the sort of smaller startup companies realize that you no longer have to put a full-time C-suite together to run a company. You can bring in that talent and that expertise as you need it that will do the job that you need to do at considerably less money while you're finding your feet.
With the virtual world now too, its possibilities are
endless.
I've spoken to a few companies, one in particular that wants to do gene therapy in China, which is a big trend right now because you can use that data and you can file your IND. You can use it for any regulatory purposes in the US. And they were all virtual. So it's
cheaper
nice
than having to people keep getting on flights to go somewhere, right? Yeah. Not great for the airline industry, but great for other people's pockets.
Good for carbon footprint.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. One part that I did want to talk to you about, I read somewhere where you describe yourself as a rare parent.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? What is that?
Today's episode is brought to you by CNA USA Executive Search. We support life sciences, biotech, medtech, and advanced therapies companies with search solutions built on credibility, deep networks, and an authentic approach to partnership. If you're hiring, planning ahead, or simply want to learn more about what we do, visit cnasearchusa.com. Now, on to today's conversation.
So I was just about ready to join Rocket Pharma, which would have been my first role in a gene therapy company. And 3 weeks before that, I received the results of a genetic whole exome sequencing of my daughter, who was, I think, about 3 at the time, maybe 4. And she came back and they called me and they said, we have the results and we found, and right away I jumped in and I put out there what I thought she had all along. And they said, no, it's something very rare. It's called DDX3X. It's a mutation on the DDX3X chromosome, typically in male and females because of it lies on the X chromosome. Depending where the mutation lies on this chromosome also predicts how good or bad the disease could be for the child.
Right.
So I couldn't even talk about it without crying for a very, very long time. I could not, especially at work when I would tell people and teams, because it was really hard to process that all the work you've done in the past, and you become very independent. You see the cancer patient stories, and you say, okay, like it's data and we're helping them. And then here I am, oh my gosh, my daughter has a disease. How the hell am I going to help her? And then obviously all the care that she needed and so forth. We are very lucky though that she doesn't have, she's a very mild version of the disease. It does come with a host of medical issues you have to be aware of, but once I stepped into that role at Rocket and then have been in rare disease gene therapy ever since, it just made me advocate more for what we were doing and appreciate what companies are doing to treat ultra rare diseases. And I could look at it as a rare employee. So I could give feedback as how parents would or caregivers, and I could give feedback as an employee. So I think having that was really has changed my world, my life, and the way I am as a professional.
And did it change how you approach clinical development and patient impact?
Yes, it does. In my last position, we were treating people in the hopes that they're getting their vision back. And so having the perspective of what I'm doing now, and let's build centers of excellence. That's what we're trying to do with the DDX Foundation. So can we start building centers of excellence for this disease? So they overlap quite a bit. And it gives me a lot of insight to how I can contribute in the rare disease program development. And I think and I'm working on right now a very ultra rare disease. And the first things I want to do going in there is just, do you have access to the advocacy group and teams? Are you meeting with them? Like getting, I would say, into that advocacy area very early on will help you and help the patients. It's a win-win.
Right. Where you are, because you actually sit on the board as well, don't you, of the DDX3X. What's that experience been like? Because I would imagine a lot of people involved don't have your experience in the actual field. So what are you able to bring to that experience?
One is I listen a lot. I listen because everybody there has a different story, and I want to hear what they're going through and what their child is going through. And then I have been able to network, luckily, quite a bit.
Yep.
I have knocked on doors and have not been afraid to do that because, again, I've built these relationships with people. When I was at one company, I won't name them, I asked them, could you do me a favor? Can we use this vector to treat my daughter's disease? And they did a whole BD deep dive into it for me. And we couldn't do it because at that time, Taysha Therapeutics was working on DDX3X gene therapy, but they considered it. And I was like, oh, wow, thank you. And then at another company, I was able to bring in some type of a partnership with the academic institution and the company. And then company ran out of money. I had to reprioritize where they were spending their money.
Okay. All right. And how is your daughter now? Is she?
She's good. She's good? She's great.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. So one of the areas, part of being a fractional member, is that you're coming in at all these different stages of a business, generally when they're very young and who knows what is going on, what's going to happen. You've talked about operational resilience. And what does that actually look like in real life?
It's being agile. It's one day you have one study you're executing, and overnight, or there's a conversation in the hallway, and this has happened to me once. The conversation in the hallway changed the whole design of the trial. And so, I have to go back and re-strategize. See, for me, that's fun. I love doing it. But I think it's really having that agility and mindset to know at any given moment, something can change. I worked at a company where they didn't know how to administer the drug, and I was sending my trial managers to pharmacies to work with pharmacists on how are we really going to administer this drug in an IV push. So sometimes you go in and you don't know what you don't know until you're in there. And so putting together a good strategy, a good team, being agile, and like I said earlier, just knowing at any moment the whole development
flip.
Or it could be I've been in situations where you're working so hard on something and they cut the program. We can't spend any more money on this. And you're like, oh, it's why I never became attached to any one program, because you just, again, didn't know. And it built resilience, in the clinical space.
What do you think separates companies that survive from those that don't?
Oh, I love that question. I think being realistic. Senior management teams and leaders may not like to hear me say this, but again, it's part of really what I've learned. Do not put timelines out to your board of directors or press release that are not realistic. I have had to raise my hand several times and say, I'll work as hard as I can, but I'm telling you now, we're not going to meet these timelines and corporate milestones that are going out to the world. And I think when companies step back and realize that, it could really be the difference between life and death.
Yep.
Because you're promising data at a certain point for your next inflection point for investing, and you're not getting it because the timelines were unrealistic. And I also think
why do people do it? Is it ego? Is it belief that we could build it and we'll make it happen? Or why don't people? I mean, I've always been of the school of under promising something and then looking great when it turns up way ahead of schedule. But why in this industry do people tend to allow themselves to set these unrealistic timescales?
If I had to guess, competition. There's this space, and I think across the GLP-1 space now, right? That's huge. That's really competitive. And where, I focus on the gene therapy space, you want to be the first one to get a gene therapy, like the Rett programs. You want to be the first one to treat patients with Rett, which has been extremely hard to do. And the competition, I think, really drives aggressive timelines.
Yeah.
It is. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But the reality is, you want to enroll...
The implications, though, of getting that timeline wrong.
And you could probably enroll a vaccine study. When I worked at Wyeth, I loved working in the vaccine space, which I know now is controversial, but you can enroll pretty much a whole study in a day or two. If you go outside the U.S. or even within the U.S., you find the places where you can enroll, you can do that quickly. Absolutely. So I'm not saying you can't. It really just depends on the indication, the competition, the amount of financing you have. And I think a lot of companies now are really looking to partner with big pharma. And if you do that, you get really good milestone payments, but you have to meet those milestones.
Meet the milestones.
Right?
Yeah. You don't get the payment if you don't do it. So, and I guess it's weighing up the pressure that puts on teams to deliver, and all the other things that go with that.
Yeah, and in my position too, you're absolutely right. And I've never candidly had this conversation before, but it does put the pressure on I'll use just the clinical operations organization. And so I've had to coach my teams on how to handle that, and coach them on learning to advocate, teaching them to advocate and to speak up. And one person, I just saw so much growth in her over the years. I've been lucky to work with her at several companies, and she was speaking up in project team meetings. And I'm like, yes, you're telling them that this isn't going to happen. We're not going to get drugged there tomorrow. You're really speaking up. So I think managing down to at times like that, where you're up against really aggressive timelines and budgets, is, and
at least giving people something to think about.
Yes.
If you're going to speak up, then your voice is going to be heard far more than if you don't say anything.
Yes. And it's confidence, right? Again, it goes back to building the confidence. You know what you're talking about, right? I know more than most people in the room when it comes to the clinical operations, logistics, or clinical supplies. So, and you have experience to back it up. And that goes back to the trust. You hired me, and I had this conversation with the CEO at one point, and I said, you hired me, right? Did you trust me to do the job? He said, of course. I said, stop micromanaging. If you trust me to do this, I will do it. And then after one deliverable came and went, he said, you were right. I said, I know, you have to micromanage, and that's the other thing too at the smaller companies. But I come in saying, if you trust me to do my job, I'll do it. And so,
and if you trust me to do my job, let me do my job.
well, that's it.
Right?
Yeah. And, it's a new relationship and I get it. So I can see both ways, but.
Yep. Okay. All right. And speaking of which, what kind of leader would you say that you are today from, say, 10 years ago?
I would say, honestly, I'm at my baseline. I don't want to say I'm the same, but I always valued communication, which I still do. I always realized you have to manage up, which I still do. Even back, 10 years ago, I had to develop a team, build a team. And when I left the company, I received flowers, thank you notes. I'm like, wow, I didn't realize I made an impact on these people. So I really try to foster, educate, and value the team. And I want them to do well, not at just this company, but really help them with their career. And that's the same type of leadership style that I have to this day.
Right.
So
it's
I
probably not changed. It's evolved.
No, I think my hair color has changed and my haircut through the years, but I do have more patience, I would say.
Right. Okay, that's fair enough. So looking ahead, if we ever get out of this apocalyptic winter that we're in.
Oh, yeah.
Where do you see clinical operations evolving over the next, say, 5 years?
I hope the funding, and it does sound like it is coming back with more IPOs and really big IPOs. So I would love to see this space really get back to where it was in terms of having dedicated teams, people getting help when they need it. And that's been a struggle. And if I'm coming to you and saying, hey, I need help, I can't do this, we need to hire this person or we need a consultant for that, the team is burnt out, is that going to change? I hope maybe with some extra money that we can get back to where we were not so burnt out. And that was the other thing I would tell my team. They're on vacation or I'm going to dial into a call. No, you're on vacation. So I really hope with the industry maybe having a better investment impact that it can allow clinical teams to not be as stretched as they have been.
And do you see fractional leadership kind of becoming the norm over time?
Yes.
Yeah, I do too, actually.
I think
for certain companies, at certain stages of those companies, that it will become the norm, that's how, I think data will show that's how it can work.
And sometimes, I was in a position where the head of regulatory left the company and right away we were saying we have to hire someone. We were reviewing CVs and we were interviewing people. And I do think finding the right fit, culture fit at a smaller startup or, a young company is probably one of the most important things when you're hiring. And so we spent a lot of time, a couple months on this, and then we brought in a fractional role and things just moved. And I have to say, we didn't know who the culture fit and this person stayed on for about 2 years until they made a decision on what they were doing with the regulatory department. So
people can evolve into full-time positions.
Yeah, I've had some
and you already know the cultures, right? You already know. I think that's why I think even, I say very, very often, even with fractional roles, that culture fit is so important. And then because you never know what's going to happen along the way. And then you've got a built-in person ready to take on a bigger role and play a bigger part within the company. So, but I tend to agree. I think that the future for fractional is very much there. So one final question I have for you, Sarah. I'm very conscious of your time, so I know that
It's okay.
been very generous with it. As somebody, as a parent of a child with a rare disease and also somebody in the industry, what would you say to someone navigating this industry as a parent or as a caregiver as the best way to find their way through it?
I'll be attending the World Orphan Drug Congress in Boston in June. And so I do go there as an employee and as an advocate for my daughter. And I meet so many people there that have children with rare diseases. Anyone I speak to that has this in common, they teach me. So I would just say that I have a friend I know, and they have a daughter with a rare disease, and he started talking to me about all these clinical trials. He's not in science at all. I said, wow, you really came up to speed. Did you look at this company? He said, yeah, I did already. And so I think what I have seen personally is that parents are educating themselves. I've seen that in a lot of companies, and I've seen it personally. So honestly, I listen to what they have to say. And I don't know what I would tell them any differently than what they're telling me. I have met new families in the DDX community, and you tell them to be strong, never give up for your child, the basics, but then they come back and tell me things that they're doing that I never knew. So
and they can be a huge help to the companies that are looking for, that are working on the cures or the treatments for those diseases, right?
Yes.
I don't think there's anything stronger, particularly for funding, awareness, and all of those sorts of things.
And eventually
having a patient, advocating and
yes,
somebody being able to kind of speak up from the patient's perspective.
And a lot of the companies I've been at for gene therapy it's the patient advisory committee. Yep. Most companies call it. And you have maybe 5 or 6 patients or their caregivers and really giving you feedback on the protocol. This, day 2 is way too long for us to be there. And didn't you think about this and that? And we didn't, right? Yep. And so you can make the changes and accommodate the patients.
So I guess the key area there is to the advice to parents is get involved. Why is that happening? And why are you doing that? Really wanting to sort of get down in the weeds of what the treatments are for somebody. Would you say that was fair?
Yes, absolutely. And even offer to go on volunteer panels. I was also a committee member of Simon Searchlight, and they're amazing. They do so much research dedicated to autism and rare diseases. So they'll ask parents to get involved on a committee, and they'll ask us for feedback on all different types of initiatives they're doing. And I've met people from all over the world, all different occupations. Every single one of them has a child with a very rare disease. And so it was nice to see other members of the community being involved. So that's the other type of advice I would give is, volunteer on any type of committee, whether it's your child's disease or not, but just being involved
can make a huge difference.
Yes,
absolutely. Well, listen, Sarah, thank you so much. I've learned a lot today, and it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you.
Thank you, Sharon. You too.
I wish you every success in what you're continuing to do. I see that I think you'll be having all sorts of fingers in all sorts of pies as a fractional person and building that out.
And
so you might be too busy to do any more of your dream area of selling and renting houses.
But that's also a huge change moving into a fractional role is that you don't own the product, right? You're in, you're out, and you don't have your own pipeline. So I personally now I love that because I do get to see so many different types of drugs and diseases. So that's been really, really fun. Then I'm learning more about, cardiomyopathy than I ever did before. So yeah, I have to say that's been a really pleasant surprise moving into this role.
Excellent. Well, listen, Sarah, thank you so much for the time that you've given today. I've learned a lot. So it's been an absolute pleasure. I wish you every success with what you're continuing to do. And I wish your daughter continued good health and improving health as she continues along on her journey. So I will certainly be following along as to how you're getting on. But for now, have a fabulous weekend, and we'll catch up soon.
Yeah, and Sharon, it was such a pleasure speaking with you. So thank you for having me today.
No, pleasure's all mine. Have a great weekend.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining me for this episode of She Leads Biotech. If today's story inspired you, subscribe, follow, and comment. Because when one woman's voice is heard, many more find theirs. Until next time, stay curious, stay courageous, and keep leading.